It has been a good year for the Pinocchio fandom. Pinocchio Bros have no less than 3 Pinocchio remakes out this year, and boy, do I really hate Pinocchio after watching all of them. And real talk, each one seems to get more disturbing than the last one on some level. From Fruity Pinocchio, to the horrifying Disney remake, to Del Toro's more intentionally dark reimagining. Pinocchio was first a story written back in the late 1800s, and even had other adaptations before the famous 1940s Disney movie, which most people are the most familiar with. Now, I never watched Pinocchio growing up, so I made sure to watch the Disney version first before digging into these other 3. Pinocchio, of course, follows the story of a puppet that is animated who hopes to become a real boy by embodying certain values a real boy should have. Pinocchio is brought to life by a fairy-like figure, in this case of the Disney movie, the Blue Fairy, though apparently she had turquoise hair in the book instead of being a blonde. In addition to being animated, the Blue Fairy asks a cricket to be Pinocchio's conscience, trying to reason with him in the world to be good. Pinocchio is practically a baby and thrown into the world where there's quite literally someone trying to take advantage of him on every single street corner, and he can't even just walk to school without getting mixed up in bad business. Pinocchio is convinced by some criminal types to give up his idea of school and try to become a famous actor. After managing to escape a crazed puppeteer because of this, Pinocchio ends up getting tricked by the same criminals again, this time being taken with other boys to a place called Pleasure Island. Pleasure Island is ultimately a place where boys are brought to think that they can run free and have fun and not worry, but they are instead turned into donkeys and forced to work in salt mines. The story of Pinocchio before it was a movie was largely about the ways that young men, particularly young boys, were being exploited in the late 1800s. Boys would be lured in with the promise of fun and money without having to actually work hard, like in school, but would be pushed into jobs that milk them for as much work as possible, keeping them barely afloat. These men would have been alienated from their family by convincing them that parents don't know how easy it is to make money and have a good time, and by the time that they realized they were tricked, they'd practically be an indentured servant relying on the system to just scrape by. This may seem unrealistic by today's standards, but back in the 1800s, young men didn't have things like the internet with which they can talk to each other and go over all the weird behavior that was being presented to them. They just had their friends, their family, and then this very scary outside world that was constantly offering them cool chances to escape their families and the lifestyles that their families had built. Pinocchio manages to escape this fate to find that his father, that he hasn't seen since the beginning of the movie, is no longer home and has been swallowed by a whale trying to find Pinocchio. Pinocchio manages to go out to sea, find Geppetto in the whale, save his father, and in doing so, manages to turn himself into a real boy. Pinocchio has since had more than 15 adaptations since the Disney film, but this year they really hit us hard with 3 new Pinocchio films. Fruity Pinocchio was quite the disappointment to me, and I think a lot of fans were disappointed as well. Searching YouTube, you can find snippets and compilations of the movie that feel absolutely hilarious, but the actual movie is a lot more boring. The film was originally a Russian animated film that took itself more or less seriously, at least more seriously than the dub would have you believe. What's interesting is that this funny dub starring Pauly Shore was actually a second dub for the movie in English, with another one already being available that doesn't include their added humor. I don't imagine the movie as a whole is particularly good, even in its original form, but the musical sequence involving Pinocchio's love interest was beautiful and surprising. The dubbing crew attempted to reimagine the movie as a kind of Shrek spin-off, a funny fairy tale making fun of itself, but it found surprisingly few places to actually add in jokes. Even in the opening line, they try really hard to force some humor in, and it's so bad that I can't even explain it, I just have to play it for you.
Maybe Leonardo. That won't do either. He'd grow up to be a selfish actor, or an artist, or a turtle who only cares about pizza.
Following Fruity Pinocchio, Disney decided to make Pinocchio the next in its long line of Disney animated films, being given live-action adaptations that rely heavily on 3D animation. This is somehow the most disturbing of the Pinocchio films, despite mostly just being an adaptation of the Disney version. The 3D use of Pinocchio is just horrifying, and then having 3D talking animals thrown into the mix was very unpleasant. While some of the scenes are extravagant and fun, such as when they are at Pleasure Island, most of it is shot very boring and generically. The original was not known for its cinematography so much as its beautifully painted backgrounds with the animation dancing in front of it, and that just doesn't translate well into live action, particularly when the script is so similar to the original and it was already pretty stiff. Like most Disney remakes, it makes some small changes such as the whale being a giant monster at the end, which was really cool, but Pinocchio suddenly deciding he can run his legs as fast as a speedboat seemed really weird. While some changes to the story helped it flow better, one thing that really was odd to me was Pinocchio not really needing a conscience. Whereas in the animated film, he was seen enjoying the destruction with the other boys, in the live-action film, it scares him, and he even tries to convince his friend that they are doing something wrong. All of this led to the release of Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, the darkest reimagining yet, and intentionally so this time. While some other adaptations, like the recent Disney remake, showed Geppetto had a son before creating Pinocchio, we see quite a bit of his life before he dies at just 10 years old in this film, leaving Geppetto to drunkenly carve a new son out of wood. This film is a stop-motion animated film, so you're going to enjoy it a lot more than the others just for the novelty of its animation, and it is a very beautiful movie. Here, Pinocchio is visited not by a beautiful fairy, but a scary blue deity who grants him life. Pinocchio falls into a lot of the same traps as the previous adaptations, but in addition to those, he ends up getting put into Italy's war efforts as well. This came about because Pinocchio is immortal, and anytime he seems to get killed, he is sent back to life. This is done by another blue deity, one implied to be older and wiser than the one who granted Pinocchio life. This is a sister to the blue fairy who brought Pinocchio to life and who wants to help him, but sees Pinocchio as more cursed by her sister. Every time Pinocchio dies, she is here to send him back to life, but only after a short time has passed where she can give him some cryptic hints about what's to come. The movie follows Pinocchio being even more blind and naive than the other versions, and he really feels like a puppet brought to life as opposed to a naive boy playing extra dumb. His relationships as a whole are very strong in this film as well, with Pinocchio developing a real rapport with a friend he makes, with the two experiencing issues with their own fathers and dealing with it together. While Geppetto is seen very little in most of the Pinocchio films, he is the very heart of each of their stories, and this one is definitely the most brutal. Watching him lose his son, then drunkenly carve out an imperfect Pinocchio was a lot harder to watch than the other adaptations where he simply is a happy old man making yet another wooden creation. In the end, Pinocchio is made real just like in the other films, but there's so much more pain leading up to it. The evil-looking blue fairy visits them at the end again, apologizing, saying she only meant to cause joy, in which Geppetto retorts that it is a terrible, terrible joy. Perhaps the most weird thing about the Del Toro Pinocchio is that it even portrays Pinocchio as a sort of parallel to Jesus, but with Pinocchio coming back every time he dies. They even have a scene where Pinocchio is crucified, just as Jesus is on the wooden cross Geppetto helps put together earlier in the film. As beautiful as Del Toro's Pinocchio is, it really makes me wonder why this story is getting so many adaptations. Growing up, I did not like Pinocchio or really most Disney films overall, but I especially didn't know anyone who thought of Pinocchio as their favorite movie. Even Disney seems to understand this, making their Pinocchio a direct-to-Disney Plus release instead of hitting theaters like The Lion King or Aladdin or the other live-action remakes in the last few years. Again, Del Toro's Pinocchio is legitimately good, but I wonder who it was really made for, and in a world already filled with so many reboots, it's a shame to know that a lot of stories like this Pinocchio film might actually be seen less because of the title Pinocchio than if it had been released as a standalone stop-motion film for Netflix. But what do you guys think? Do you like Pinocchio, the original, or the new? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you next time.